That's an improvement, but that's still a D. If you came home with 63% on your paper, I'm sure your parents are going to say, oh, that's so good, you got over 50, right? We also have 63% of people who believe courts are committed to protecting individual and civil rights. Again, improvement is still a D. On the final one, they say 59% of people believe courts are political. On that one, we would have really liked to see a 0, right? So we know that there's some work that we can be doing. Hopefully, some of the things that we talk about today help us increase that public trust and confidence. So this is what we call the court user experience wheel. The person who helped me work on this is now presenting in a room across the hall, Credell Webb. And so he and I were talking, and we were like, how do you look at the court experience, the court user's experience? What influences that? There's a number of factors that will shape how a person perceives the court, their expectations around the court services. And if we know more about that, perhaps we can delve into that to figure out how can we deliver better services that people actually trust and are confident will reflect what the judicial system is all about. So this outer ring, we're talking about people who are coming through our doors. They're coming through our doors before they even had contact with the first person. They have some impressions. Depending on, say for instance, how are you coming in our doors? Are you coming in as a juror? Are you coming in as an attorney? Are you coming in as a party to a case? You got some different expectations of what this court system is going to look like. And it may be even different when you get to our doors, how security treats you as they figure out where you belong in this bucket. The type of business, if you're coming to court because it's a good event, the adoption, you're probably coming in skipping and jumping with balloons and everything like that. If you're coming in to pay a ticket, your disposition may be a little jaded before you even get there. You think about the wayfinding and accessibility. How easy is it to get to your court? How easy is it to park? How much do I have to pay to park? Then there's the whole piece about perceptions and trust. What have others told me about their court experience? Most of our people are not looking on our websites to figure out what the court experience is about. They're asking the person who's sitting next to them under the dryer at the hair shop, in the barber chair. And that's where they're getting whether or not should I trust this, should I be okay with this, or should I be alarmed? The familiarity and the history with the court. If I'm an attorney who goes to your court every day, I know exactly where to go. I can greet people by name, face, they know me, and it's a pleasant experience for the most part. But if I've never been into your court, it's a little different. It seems like people start speaking this foreign language, and then they have these responses, not my department, or I'm sorry, I can't give you legal advice. Those things like that actually shape the experience. The second level is the informed impressions. These are things that we learn about people when we start having the conversation. But some of that can also impact what they think about the court, how they expect the court to act. If your income is a certain level, you probably feel that you're going to be treated in court a certain way. A defendant who has a court-appointed attorney may be suspect because I don't have enough money to afford my own counsel. I'm not getting the best counsel. So those things are going on in a person's mind, a court user's mind. Information that we find out about people's educational background, things like that can impact what their court experience is. And then that internal ring, that initial impression. This is when I first walk into your doors and I haven't said a word to you, you haven't said a word to me, and we're just looking at each other. We're sizing each other up based upon things that really don't matter. Your age, your race, your appearance. And we're asking our workforce to get past all of that and get to the middle. We want you to get past people's historical impressions, the thing that you find out about them once you start asking the questions, the initial impressions that we as humans just automatically have, because we want you to deliver what we call human-centered outcomes. Basically like the due process, the respect, the neutrality, the voice, the opportunity to be heard, those things there. But you got to get through all of that. And court users are having all of these things going on. So we're asking our workforce to do a lot. So when we say workforce excellence, we're asking a lot of the people who work at our front desk, who work in the courtrooms, who work at the security even, take all of this into consideration. And then you as court leaders, when you're thinking about designing services, you can look at the court user experience and say, well, have we thought about maybe the person who can't afford to look a certain way when they come into court? Looking at the appearance part. Maybe we have a closed closet or something like that. So those are things that will impact a person's experience in our court.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned in Michigan. So in Michigan, we've undertaken a couple different efforts in a couple different spaces to really understand what's happening with our workforce and also what the court user experience is and how those two things come together. So the Michigan Judicial Council is a fairly new body in Michigan. They came into fruition in about 2021, and since that time they've been responsible for strategic planning for the judiciary as a whole and kind of being that visionary group for Michigan's trial courts to figure out where improvements need to be made and what those efforts look like. And so the council stood up a work group in 2023 on workforce excellence to look at some of the challenges that court employees are facing on the day-to-day, but also look at some of the issues around recruitment and retention and some of the employment challenges that court administrators are facing. And so this group put together a statewide survey that went out to all court employees across the state to look at those specific challenges and see if we could get some data that would better inform the council to be able to make some recommendations and come up with some tools and some techniques and strategies to help court administrators address some of the challenges that they're facing within their courts.
So before I go to the next slide, can you tell us who's part of the MJC?
Yes, so the Judicial Council is made up of 29 members. It includes the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who chairs the group, State Court Administrator, an additional justice, Court of Appeals judge, representation from each of the judicial associations and the court administrator associations across the state. We've got members of the bar, members of the public. I think that's, county clerks. I think that's it. But it's a pretty diverse group of stakeholders that allows us to kind of get voices from all different perspectives as we're planning for the judiciary as a whole. And so this is some of the just like raw survey data to give you an understanding of who was surveyed and what that looks like. So we had about 956 total responses, which came from 69 different counties across the state, which Michigan has 83 total. So a pretty good sample. It's broken down here by the different court types. You can see court sizes based off the number of judges that are in their court, the different regions. SCAO has 6 geographical regions that we divide our courts up into. And then there's additional data on race and ethnicity, gender, and age. So this sample represents about 10% of the total employment population for trial courts in Michigan. And so one of the big questions that we asked that we got a pretty good response rate to and had some interesting data on it was, do I feel respected and included at my court? And so if you look at this, it's broken down by the range that we gave them of responses. Yes, I agree with that statement. I strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. And so you'll see for the most part, we've got this strongly agree and agree, but it's not quite where we'd like it to be. And so when we take that question and we break it down based off of their role within the court, whether it's the court supervisor, frontline staff, deputy court administrator, security, judicial officer, there's some interesting trends that show up in that data. While we see an overall significant level of satisfaction, when we look at the roles, we see that those who hold higher positions within the court tend to be more satisfied than those who do not. And then one of the other questions we asked was what brought you to want to work for the courts? What was attracting about working in government and the judiciary specifically? And so when we gave them about 10 or 12 different options to choose from, and the ones that bubbled up to the top were the work hours or the schedule, meaningful and important work, healthcare benefits, career opportunities. But when we flip that and look at what improvements employees would like to see, it changes. And so by large, the highest issue that bubbled to the top was pay. Below that is feeling valued and appreciated. So when we go back to our previous question about, do you feel valued and included? Do we think that this reflects what we saw in the other results? Why do you think that is? Thoughts? Anybody?
She is not on TV. She can see you.
Yeah.
Anyone take a stab at it? Thank you, Tess.
Hi, good morning. I think when you try to quantify the feeling, the outcome changes, right? When you have to take a step back and look at, oh my gosh, what does this mean monetarily or for the benefits or for the hours, then the feeling changes and the response changes.
Okay. Anything else?
There's other things. I mean, they generally say pay. I mean, I see that with my staff, and they always say pay, but flexible, maybe working 10s or in having a rotating schedule, they also equate that to pay sometimes. So you can see that actually go down as they're feeling more like they have flexibility and stuff.
And I will clarify that they didn't just have to select one. We asked them to select their top 3 when they answered this question. So it's very likely that pay and feeling valued and appreciated were in multiple people's top 2 for that very reason, right? When you think about front level employees and the amount of work that they're doing and the way that court work has changed drastically, even just in the past 5 years, past 10 years, the skills that they need are not what they used to be. And so when we talk about workforce excellence, like keeping in mind what you're asking your employees to do and the things that they have to, the level that they have to perform at versus the interactions that they have with the public, how they're treated on the day-to-day basis by judicial officers, leadership, keeping in mind that they're still low man on the totem pole. And while they may not be making as much as you as an administrator or some of your frontline managers do, they're still feeling the brunt of a lot of the work and a lot of the day-to-day interactions with dissatisfied customers. Okay, so one of the other things that this work group did was after we received all that survey data and had some time to process, we decided that we want more information. We want to understand this data a little bit better. We want to have conversations with those who are in the field, who are experiencing these things, to really get a handle on why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing. And so we held roundtable discussions with court administrators in each of the 6 regions across the state to get that feedback, to go through their individual regions' results with them and have them explain to us, what are you seeing? What are your employees coming to you with? What are the challenges that you're facing day to day? Help us understand the data that we're seeing. And so these are the areas that we had discussions with them on. We talked about skill building, we talked about technology, we talked about employee wellness, feeling valued and appreciated. What does leadership look like at your court? How are you providing an environment that feels inclusive? And what are your efforts around recruitment and retention, or your challenges that you're facing regarding recruitment and retention? And so while the data tends to give us the numbers that we're looking for, we needed something else. We needed to understand. We wanted them to tell their story. And so Zanel was a court administrator at the time, and so she got to experience the roundtable discussions and firsthand and kind of participate in those conversations. And
So, what I remember was that a lot of people were saying we hire people, we can't keep people. I worked at like the largest trial court and had probably the lowest salaries. So you hire the people, they get their 6 months in. You really don't get them performing the work because now they're going to a neighboring court that pays more money. So it's like, okay, so then maybe we need to look at the employment with the court on a broader basis. Did the person stay inside the judiciary? Are we still getting the benefits from that? And maybe there's some conversations that need to go on between courts. Since we're not a unified state where everybody's employed by the state judiciary, maybe there's some conversations that need to go on between courts. Whereas, we know that you're the training ground. And if you're the training ground, maybe there needs to be some acknowledgement. I'm not going to keep my people very long, so I can't have a 2-year training program because that person's going to be gone before I really get what that investment is. So how do you start structuring that? So that was one of the things that came to light. The other part I led the discussion on in my region was inclusion in work environment. And just the realization that different people needed different things in the environment. It was ironic that at the time, one of the court administrators was just returning back from a parental leave, and she needed to go ahead and express her milk. So we're running around inside a fabulous college campus, and there is no nursing room or space set aside for someone who needs to pump. And it's like, so do you have that inside your court? Are there other things that your workforce is facing that you haven't addressed? And how will you find out those things exist, and how can you put those structures in place?
those discussions were really interesting to go from region to region too, because the challenges that like Sanel was experiencing in her region were very different than the challenges that were expressed up in the northern portions of the state where it's more rural and less urban. And so it was interesting to kind of see how different courts had different needs, but even within those regions, different courts had different needs. And it was a great networking opportunity for the administrators to all come together and kind of hear, what are you doing at your court? What's working for your employees? And I think along with the inclusive environment conversation, the other big one that we saw consistently across all 6 regions that everybody was really excited to talk about and also to learn from their colleagues on was the conversation around feeling valued and inspiring leadership, which again tracks with that data that we saw on court employees wanting to feel included, wanting to feel appreciated, wanting to feel valued in the environment that they're working in. And so it was a great conversation, and everybody was really willing to kind of come to the table and talk about what are you offering at your court to help your employees feel valued. Hybrid work schedules, opportunities for remote work, flexible scheduling, acknowledgement of birthdays or life milestones and things like that. And so it was a really robust conversation that I think tracked really well from every single one of those meetings that we had.
And I can't click to the next slide but until we also talk about one of the big things that came up was the dress code.
Yes.
And then having the ability to dress more relaxed. That was a huge one too for workers.
Okay, so the other big piece that the Judicial Council has done is the strategic planning survey. So again, I mentioned previously that the Judicial Council is responsible for strategic planning for the judiciary across the state. And so what they did in 2021 was send out this survey stakeholder survey to all of the various groups within the state that have some sort of stake in the judiciary. So that included internal and external stakeholders, judges, court administrators, bar members, law enforcement, prosecutors, community partners, things like that, to get an understanding of, one, what people's thoughts on the court were, the current state of the court, how are we servicing the public, what are the areas in which they feel we need to improve? And then we took that information and paired it with data on the national level as well as the state level to kind of see, when we built this first strategic plan back in 2021, 2022, what were the focus areas going to be? So we recently repeated that process in 2025 because our strategic agenda will expire at the end of this year. So right now the council is working through repeating that strategic planning process. And we updated the survey a little bit to kind of get an idea of over the past 3 years, have we made any improvements in these areas? And are the goals still the same? Are the areas that we're working in still the focus areas? Do we need to shift at all? And so this is kind of a breakdown on what that survey looked like. And then we'll talk in a minute about who answered those questions and how that was. But this tool has been really helpful because we've been able to take this information and also use it across some of our other spaces. We've got a Justice for All Commission. We've got a Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have a Commission on Wellbeing and the Law. And so they've been able to leverage this data as well to inform some of the work that they're doing.
One thing I would point out too is with the strategic planning, a lot of people first, they thought the impression was, oh, this is the AO's office tool that they created. And we had to correct them. No, this is a large stakeholder partnership endeavor, and this reflects what others are saying. This is not some internal document that we created.
So it might be helpful context too. With the MJC, what they do is they do this strategic planning. We have a 3-year plan, but throughout that 3 years, they will stand up work groups in each of these areas to dig into those topics and do some research and do things like surveys and roundtable discussions. And they are tasked with making recommendations back to the court. And so at the end of their cycles, these work groups will produce a written report that kind of outlines their activities along with the recommendations that are coming for the group, goes up to the court or to the AOC for consideration for implementation of new programs or new tools or new resources to help improve services across the trial courts. So this is the breakdown of stakeholders who participated in the strategic planning survey. We've got both internal and external stakeholders. And again, those internal stakeholders are your court staff, your judicial officers, Supreme Court justices, our friend of the court, which is our parenting child support arm, directors, councils and commissions members who are doing the work, and then the external stakeholders, again, our justice system partners, your community health advocates, legislative committees, law enforcement, county clerks, prosecutors, state bar members. And so these are the raw kind of numbers. So broken down between internal and external stakeholders, you'll see, interestingly enough, over half of our survey respondents were external stakeholders. Most of those were attorneys. So when you look at this data and you look at the internal stakeholder or the external stakeholder responses, just kind of keep in mind that a lot of those numbers are attorney focused. But we actually got a lot more results in 2025 than we did in 2021, which I think was helpful to kind of give us a better idea of, are we making progress? Are people aware of the work that's being done? Are we making a difference? And so the key findings from those survey results, what we saw with some of the questions that we asked, there seemed to be a difference in the focus between internal and external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders wanted to see improvements on process, right? They want to see workforce excellence. They want to see work done around the technology that we're using and how we're able to kind of streamline processes. And trial court funding is a big project that's happening in Michigan, looking at the way that the courts are currently funded and does it make sense, and is there a better, more efficient way to do this? That was a big one that came up too. But when we looked at the external stakeholder responses, their responses were more outward facing. They wanted us to look at the public's experience. Trust and confidence was a big one. How are you able to navigate a court once you come in the door? What is the experience that court users are having as far as their interaction with court staff at various levels, with security, with the frontline staff at the counter, with the judicial officer in the courtroom? And so when we take that and look at the connection between workforce excellence and public trust and confidence, we've got internal stakeholders that say workforce excellence is the priority, and external stakeholders who say public trust and confidence is the priority. So how do we make the two fit together?
So to go further into the public side, And the question she just asked is what you as court leaders have to decide. How do those two things come together? What's the inputs on this side? What's the outputs on that other side of that equation? We have done a public satisfaction survey too, which means that we were asking, again, the attorneys and court users, whether you're a juror, whether you're a witness, whether you're a plaintiff or defendant, to give us your response. And each court was asked to take like a week and get these responses. You had like a target number because we've done the public satisfaction survey previously. And so we're saying we expect X number of surveys from your court. If you were appearing remotely, you got a QR code that the parties could actually click on and then go into the survey instrument. If you were appearing in person, they could give you the QR code or they could give you the document itself, a hard copy. And then those were sent to the AO's office. A lot of the court administrators, said basically people are like surveyed out. They didn't want to do it. It's like, but we really need to see if we can get this information, or otherwise, how do we really know how we're impacting the public? And we were asking like questions. What type of court user were you? So we have that information. What was your education level? So we would have that type of information as well. We have it statewide, but then we also broke it down by the regions. That's where you have region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the bottom. And then statewide averages up top, where, say, for instance, the first question was I able to easily find my way? Statewide, that's a 4.48 out of 5 who said they strongly agree. And then if you look at the regional level, region 1, for that question, it's 4.50. For region 2, it's 4.45. Region 3, 4.51. Region 4, 4.6. Region 5, 4.43, and then Region 6, 4.56. So some regions were above the state average, some were below. Some, like Emily pointed out before, some of our courts are located in urban jurisdictions, which is a large part of Region 1. Some are located more rurally, which is a large part of Region 4. And so you look to see inside your region, how are people impacted by that? My favorite question was, it's not on this slide here, but basically, did you understand what happened from your court proceeding? Because that's very important. After the court has finished with your case and they're going on to another one, do you know what you're supposed to do? Is there an appointment that you needed to make? Is there a fine you needed to pay? And do you know where you were supposed to do that? But that's not on the sample question that we have here. And then what was really fabulous about the public satisfaction survey, you can look at it statewide, you can divide it where it just shows your region, and you can look at the different questions for that region. You can look at your county, you can look at your particular court, you can look at those who took it online electronically, those who took it by paper. You can look at their role. So is it really all the attorneys that are driving the numbers up, or is it a different segment? So do we need to make some changes so maybe attorneys understand what the next step is, but maybe those who are self-represented don't? You can look at education level. You can look at if the person came into court today self-represented or with an attorney as well, and also language.
So the other thing about the public satisfaction survey is this is a great management tool for our court administrators, our chief judges, to be able to see the public's perception of what's happening in their individual court. But we also publish this data publicly, so anybody can access the survey data. You can go right on the website, and if you access the materials, there's a link to it that you can click on that link and it'll take you right to the dashboard. But you can, like Zanal was saying, you can filter off by a million different things and kind of look at specific areas that you want to improve in or get an understanding of how you're doing to be able to make really targeted decisions on how to improve workforce within your specific court.
The change, we also go back and say, should we ask different questions? Are we missing something? Do we need to delve deeper in certain things?
And we did, our statistical research department at the State Court Administrative Office is kind of the arm that oversees this survey, but they've also worked very closely with the Judicial Council, the DEI Commission, some of the other bodies to do that work as far as reviewing the survey and giving some feedback on the questions and making improvements to it and what information we're trying to capture.
So the themes and takeaway, finding your way around tends to be easier for those proactively engaged with the systems. Expected, right? The attorneys, the prosecutors, the plaintiffs, defendants. Not easy for your victims and your witnesses. Remote participation tends to be easier for the attorneys and the parties. Again, they're probably using the remote system quite frequently where the parties aren't. They probably have a laptop where maybe some of the parties are trying to access it through cell phones. So that makes sense.
That goes to all the calls that your clerks get all day long about, I don't know where my Zoom link is. Which room am I supposed to be in? I have virtual court today. How do I get there, right?
Now, the third bullet was like a surprise. Unrepresented individuals tend to express higher scores than representative individuals.
Why do we think that is?
I'm sorry. I think with the represented individuals, there's going to be a breakdown of communication between the attorney and the represented litigant, because sometimes the attorney will not forward that information on to the represented party, and then they call us and we provide them with that service.
Another factor that might be contributing is sometimes judges are more patient with unrepresented litigants and they may take more time and explain things in greater detail. Whereas if you have an attorney, they expect the attorney to provide that information to the client.
Or the flip side to that is, what if you have an attorney who's scheduled to be in your courtroom at 9:30 and their case isn't heard until 11 o'clock and they've got another case in another courtroom or another courthouse, and now they're frustrated with the judge, the court staff, whoever. That's going to trickle down to the information that they give back to their client, right?
And one of the final findings were victim and witnesses. They gave us the lowest scores consistently regarding their experience.
What do we think reasons for that is?
What are some reasons? What are some suggestions on how to improve it? I've been ignoring this side of the room. Please join us. Any ideas over here? One second, Angela.
Usually with witnesses, obviously they're coming to testify on behalf of someone. And especially if it's like in my case, trials where it's a day or 2 or 3 days, they're just sitting there not knowing exactly when they're going to be called. So they're just waiting, and then they're having to come back. So they may be told by the attorney, well, yeah, we're going to call you on the first day. The first day comes and goes. They're still not called. So, and they've had to make adjustments based on a promise that an attorney has made to them that, hey, you know, you're going to get your testimony out of the way. Usually in my court, what we tend to do, or what we try to get the attorneys to do, is, hey, if you know you have a witness, maybe you can see about taking them out of order, so that particular witness can get on to do whatever it is that they need to do, is like if they're a school teacher or something like that.
So I think you pointed out one of the other very important factors too. With this information, you can figure out who do you need to have conversations with as far as your stakeholders, partners, what collaborations could be built off of it to ensure that the court experience is a good one. Because a lot of things that the court goes on in the court, like I said, happens even before a person comes into the court, not by a court employee, so not things that you have direct control over.
And I think the victims want it now. And so they're frustrated how long all the hearings take if they've never been involved with court, and they want it now. And so that's what frustrates them.
Again, that could be helped if we have conversations with attorneys, bar associations, and things like that, and say, you know, have you had that type of conversation, if it's the prosecutor's office or whoever's bringing the case? Have you had that conversation so they realize, you know, Judge Judy is TV. It's not what really goes on here.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think one of the biggest things is getting people to understand what the actual process is. Mm-hmm. Because I think one of the biggest misnomers is we think people show up and they know what to do, and they really don't. Right. And so they've been listening to community, they've been watching TV, and there's this expectation that's unrealistic. and it's never met with truth. And so a lot of times we get frustrated that they're frustrated when nobody has explained to them the whole process. So a victim or witness don't even get explained by the person why I'm there. They say, I need you to be a witness for me. And so you bring your best friend down there, and he or she realizes, I got to be here all day. I didn't really expect to do that. And so managing people's expectation from both sides, I think, clarifies and clears up some issues.
So even if you don't get an opportunity to do that one-on-one, perhaps when you publish the results, you can start digging deeper in some of these issues and use that as a way to educate the public. Now, let me tell you a little bit about where the results are published. The Legal News. So we got to see how we can get regular media interested in this, because we want our regular court users to come in and have the advantage of knowing what does it look like in the court process. So we do need to expand where we're actually publishing this information. And of course, they'll put it in their annual reports, but usually annual reports go to your funding unit. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like, how can we make sure that the masses understand what the court process is like?
And victims are coming from a place of trauma. It's one more added layer, and our system isn't user friendly. And so even just trying to work through that trauma while filling out very complicated petitions and whatnot. The breakout session on justice metamorphosis with like a DV portal, and all of the functions and capabilities to assess folks, and that is an example of something that I think would improve your results here.
So a DV portal, staff who have been trained in secondary trauma, so they know that people will go like this, but they don't have a clue what they're shaking their heads to. Mm-hmm. Also, navigators and peer support are possible ways to help address that as well.
So one of the more recent things that's happening in Michigan is the court just recently signed an administrative order to launch a pilot for accompaniment services. And so what that program will do is it allows victim advocates to come in and speak on behalf of victims, to accompany them to hearings, to help explain process to them. So that's a new tool that we're exploring in Michigan. Registration for that, I think we're hoping will open late fall, early next year. And so we're hoping to have some more data as we start working through that to see kind of how that improves these numbers as well.
So we talked about certain things, but I believe that when you focus in on a problem, we also need to pull back a little bit and take a broad look at it and take a strategic approach to whatever we're trying to solve. We got data, and we want to see how we can actually come with a solution that will help resolve the issue, not something that'll just put a Band-Aid on it and allow us to move on. So with the strategic approach is always look at your data, look at your trends, what are they telling you, how are they informing you, and then what would be a long-term solution, not just something that's going to work individual by individual or just for today, something that's broader than that. When we think of our strategic plans that we may have in our office, how many of your courts have strategic plans? Okay, that's looks like about a third. And it's no big deal if you don't have a strategic plan, as long as you're employing that strategic thinking and decision making. But we think about, what's the mission of our court? What do we value? What's our core values? And what's the vision of the court? And probably one of the core values is that public trust and confidence. So you want to make sure that that's carried out and reflected in everything that you do.
And does your staff know what your mission, vision, and core values are?
Go back and quiz them. And if they don't know, again, it's something that they need to learn. Why do you want to work in courts? What are courts about? Does that align with what your vision is for yourself even? And we want well-defined goals. So we, again, like I said, we don't just want something that may work in a circumstance. We need to make sure that it's specific, it's measurable, and time-oriented. Look at the surveys and trends. I already said that. And then whatever you're thinking about doing, do the SWOT analysis. What are the strengths and weaknesses of our approach or in the environment that we're getting ready to do something in? And what are the opportunities and threats? That doesn't require a strategic plan Like I said, you can just use that as far as your decision-making tools, whatever type of issue your court is facing.
Make sure you're revisiting your strategic plan, though. I've heard from some courts, like, yeah, we have a strategic plan. We did it back in 2022, and it's on that shelf over there. How often are you going back to that plan to kind of gauge your process? How often are you going back to that plan to look at progress that you've made? And so don't just go through the steps of gathering the data, defining the goals, putting the plan in place. You actually have to walk the walk, revisit the plan, look at what you're doing, see where the improvements have been made and where there's room to continue to make improvements.
So strategic planning, strategic thinking, strategic decision-making are all ongoing processes. There is no destination. You just keep doing it and doing it. So we have a couple of examples, like from the TV show, What Would You Do? And we're gonna have you talk to your neighbors about these scenarios. We want you to think strategic planning. We want you to think workforce excellence. We want you to think also about public trust and confidence in the service delivery. So I was like, what's the opposite of utopia? And it was ectopia. I didn't know it existed. So now you're in the court of ectopia. And right now there's been a 30% increase in the complaints about the delays, the accessibility, and also how your staff acts, that indifference, right? You're concerned about these issues, and you conduct a comprehensive staff survey for your workforces, and they reveal critical insights about your workforce and your employee sentiments. So what would you do having that information? And some of it you'll have to make some presumptions as you're having your conversation. What would you do in the following scenarios? The first one, you have 1,000 staff who work in the various courts in the Ectopia County. 100 are supervisors and managers. 900 are non-supervisors and clerks. The court leaders, that 100, they've been on the job for like 15 years. The other group have been there less than 6 years, maybe an average of 6 years. And their ages are 18 to 35. You can go back, I did the math like in my head. If somebody's been on the job for 15 years, probably they started when they were 18 at the youngest. So those people we know are probably closer to the 40 range or a late 30 range at least. So talk to your neighbor. What are the concerns that you have about the staff and their ability to deliver services in a way that will instill and promote public trust and confidence? Take just a couple of minutes and talk back to your partners. Okay. So, who's willing to share what the conversation is that you're having with your partner or partners?
The first concern would be like generational divide, and and that is a risk of teamwork, communication, and a cultural gap too. So what I would recommend that training, to provide training for both the court leaders and the new hire, and let them mentor each other. So this is what I came up with.
So you're proposing a more inclusive work environment where we're aware that there probably are generational gaps, there are probably differences in communication, there's maybe cultural gaps, but bringing them together and trying to smooth through that to ensure that there's a transition of institutional knowledge, and then when the people come in for service, the court user comes in for services, they're able to, yes, other conversations.
So I went a slightly different direction because I said, in addition to looking at the people, look to see why are they not. I mean, the complaints were stuff wasn't being processed, timeliness, different things. Sometimes too, when you've had supervisory staff that's been there, like you said, 15 years plus, this is the way it is. This is the way we do it. We've all been there. That's just the way it's done. So looking at those process and procedures, because things have changed. I mean, I imagine the process, on this case is different than it was 15 years ago. Are there ways to make that more efficient? In addition to, because if the staff is feeling overwhelmed, I mean, this is the way it is and it's 37 steps, they're not really going to go any faster. So, and then we talked a lot, like I said, about the age gaps and then onboarding and what are people truly looking for, and then training even at the higher level, because sometimes when you get to that management level, you kind of stop the training. So we kind of went two different ways there. I was more about the process and the reviewing it. But.
So ongoing learning is what I heard from over here. Also making sure that the younger, newer worker has a voice where people are actually hearing what are some new ideas and ways to do things.
And change management's a big one too, right? I've heard a lot from court administrators in those roundtable discussions that there's all these new emerging technologies and we're moving to paperless and we're doing e-filing and things like that, and my staff doesn't like it and they don't want to change. So managing expectations that way, getting them to understand that there's a better way to do it. This is, yes, you're going to have to learn this new technology, but it's more efficient. It's going to streamline your job. It's going to lighten your workload. So change management's going to be a big one to keep in mind too.
So in our group, when I first looked at the scenario, I thought, well, this is an ideal staff. And this is a goal for me, to have leadership that have 15 years on the job, and then your newer employees already have 6 years on the job. It's like, I don't have any concerns about them. But as we delved a little bit deeper, we talked about the age gaps and having your less seasoned, less experienced workers, and being on the front line and making sure that they are competent enough so that the public trusts what they're saying, because it's very easy to disregard someone who is younger than you, that you don't know anything about what you're talking about. Why should I trust you? There's also the technology gap when you have your maybe newer employees who are more tech savvy, thank you, and they're dealing with staff they're dealing with the public that are not. And so they can become easily frustrated. And so providing them the tools to make sure that they understand, this is your demographic, this is the target, this is how we assist those who may not have the information, because we hold all the cards, right? We they can't go venue shopping. When they're coming to your court, it's because they have to come to your court. And so by providing the competent and compassionate staff, that is one way that we can improve our public trust.
I think Nicole makes a good point too about having staff that have different skill sets, right? So you may have a couple people in the same position and one is really good with technology, but one is really good with customer service. And so making sure you're leveraging your staff in a way that makes sense and really gets good use out of the skill set that they bring to the table. Okay, do we want to go to the next one? Okay, so your next scenario. So a lot of your supervisors are approaching retirement age, and there's 10% vacancy rate for non-supervisory positions. The majority of your new hires do not stay beyond 2 years. They move on to other things. They get their experience. They're off to the private sector or the court down the street that pays more than you do. So you have 90 new employees who have less than 2 years on the job. How might this affect public trust and confidence? And what would you do as a court leader to address it? So we'll give you a few minutes to discuss with your neighbors again, and then we'll...
We need to discuss it, huh? We're still going to give you a few minutes.
It's to audit the service delivery.
Okay, so who would like to share what your group discussed? How are you addressing this issue?
So we will have inconsistent service delivery. And my recommendation to fix this is to create a stay strategy and not only a hiring strategy.
Okay.
Because
So retention and recruitment. So what are you going to do to help that?
Create a strategy for the people who are just got hired, and how to motivate them to stay, and use the ones on board to mentor them. So that would be my strategy for this, because if we won't fix this, there will be inconsistent service delivery.
Right. You don't want to lose that institutional knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that as people are terming out, we're passing that information down, we're training new employees. When somebody retires, they're not taking everything they know with them, and now we have to slide someone into that position who has no idea what that process is, or how to do it, or where does that information come from. Thank you.
So I think a big part of the transition planning and the continuity planning is cross-training your team, right? Somebody could get sick or get hit by a bus, and that not win the lottery, yes, and walk out, and they take everything with them. And so by cross-training your team, you're ensuring that continuity of service. You're also engaging folks in other tasks and things that might get them excited, might increase their job satisfaction. So maybe it's not something they're responsible on the daily, but I think in the long term, it helps the circuit.
Does anybody here do employee satisfaction surveys? Do you get feedback? Okay. What are some of the things in those surveys? Is training coming up a lot? Like, people want more training? That was one of the things that we saw in the roundtable discussions. And it's like, I know my specific tasks and I know how that fits into this piece, but I want to know more about the big picture. I want to learn how to do what this one's doing. I want to learn what's going on in probation because I may just handle traffic cases. And so finding opportunities to expand training for your staff and making sure that they understand the process as a whole, not just the one part of the case that they're processing, is important. And like she was saying, it goes towards helping them feel valued and appreciated, which then might help with your retention efforts, right?
I remember when I first started at the court 26 years ago, it was not standard for you to go sit in a courtroom. So you have new employees who've never sat in a courtroom. So how do you think that I want to stay here? I don't even know what you do. I just know this one little piece of work that seems mundane and redundant, and there's a lot of it, not a lot in the paycheck, a lot of it. So yeah, I'm looking for a way out. Yeah. Other conversations.
In the state of Nebraska, all of our, we have checklists on almost every process you could do that would come before you. Like every petition, every kind of thing. And so you can just go out to the website and get that, and you can do your checklist down. And I think that's helped a lot so we can retain more people, because they're not always questioning themselves of, am I doing it right? Do I have to, you know exactly what the process is.
Oh, we're going to talk later. That was one of the things that came up in those discussions we had with court administrators. They asked, the big one was, can we get a civil 101? Our civil clerks know when they get this piece of paper in front of them that they have to do this with it, but they don't understand the life of the case from start to finish. They don't understand how this piece that they're processing, what happens after it leaves their desk, what are the possible outcomes for that case. When somebody calls on the phone and says, I just had a landlord-tenant case and this is what the judge told me, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Can they give them legal information, not legal advice, that informs them as to what their next step is? Does your staff understand the life of a case from start to finish, right? So things like checklists and flow charts. Flow charts are amazing. Visual quick references that you can give your staff to help them feel empowered, where they don't have to put somebody on hold and go find someone that knows the answer to that question.
So we talked about, and I'm actually from Douglas County right here, and so we've, in our discussion, and I used examples from my office, we've kind of taken the checklist a step further in my office. We have SOPs to where we break it down in steps. And so that would be helpful in this situation to where it helps people have, where if they're feeling uncertain, they can have SOPs that help them. So if somebody is gone and on vacation or wins the lottery, they still have resources that they can go to help walk them through the process. So when that information never leaves the office, we still have resources that they can go to. All of those checklists are very helpful. I've used those checklists to self-teach myself how to do a lot of things when I stepped into my position. Also, individual training plans that make ensure that our new hires learn all of their tasks. And so they feel confident when they go out on the floor on their own that they have been taught every task. And when they get promotions, that during those promotions that they're being taught every task. So the more confident that those new hires are, the more comfortable they're going to feel, and the more supported they're going to feel in their position. And hopefully that helps make them want to stay in the office because of that support that they feel.
What does your onboarding process look like, right? So do you have an official onboarding process, or do you get a new hire and you just say, here you go, do what they're doing? Like, do you have orientation? Do you have a schedule? Do they know what to expect? When they're done with onboarding and orientation, do they feel like they have the knowledge they need to be successful at their job?
So when I started as court administrator for Third Circuit in 2014, I got hired. Before I started the job, the person who is in the job basically says, hey, I'll be here for 2 weeks. And then the person who is the executive administrative assistant, I'll be here probably like a day or two after you're here. So, and I believe I got about this much information written down. It's like, now run the court. 59 judges, 500 some employees run the court. So for me, it was like, I'm not feeling this. So the chief judge and I had a conversation and we built our framework. We want to know a master calendar. What are the things that our court encounters every year, month, date, whatever? Put that together. What are the things that, you know, we need to be aware of when there's elections, this, that, and the other? So we had topical things. And we had a shared folder on the computer where everything was stored. I had a desk manual, and in there you could go, what happens in September, and here's a copy of those documents that you'll be processing in September. So everybody had a desk manual. Then it became every director needs a desk manual, because again, if you hit the lottery, this puppy still has to run, and I am not a CFO. So I need to know, what does it take to be a CFO, to make sure that that person has at least what you've left behind. And you may change some things, but at least there's a starting point, a good foundation, a good infrastructure to start with. Okay, one more for you. So out of the respondents who took that workforce survey, you asked them about, you know, did you complete the training on the ADA accommodations, language access, and other training that was offered? 34% says, yes, I did. Although 70% of the employees feel very comfortable sharing their ideas. And then there's this divide based upon the tenure and age, where the younger staff members said that they don't feel that their ideas are well received. Turn to your partner, maybe turn to a new partner, because now you know that person's court and you can go ahead and fix every problem that person is having. So turn to a new partner and have a conversation. So I'm going to cut your conversations off midstream so you'll have something to talk about at lunch. And we're going to move it along for the sake of time. So right here, like I said, you want to make sure that there's voice, that the younger staff, newer staff actually are able to express opinions and they're valued.
So putting the pieces together, we've talked about data collection, we've talked about surveys, we've talked about strategic planning, and so how do we bring that all together? So some questions for you to consider. What can I ask on public satisfaction surveys to see measured improvements? What are the questions that you're going to ask? What are you trying to measure? What do you want to see? Where are the gaps? Where are the holes you're trying to fill? Where are the improvements that need to be made? How will you measure your success? What does success look like? When you see those results, what are you hoping to see? What are you hoping not to see?
And then as a good leader, you probably already know, you'll get data. You can get more data and more data. At a certain point, you're going to have to make a decision. And you're going to develop over time that leadership intuition, that you know what works for your court and how to do it better. You're going to have to follow that. So you can't just rely upon the data and keep looking endlessly for more data and more confirmation. And sometimes your intuition is going to be wrong. And then you just have to go into that learning mode. Okay, so I failed there. Let me fail fast and let me try something differently.
Okay, so in summary, what we've talked about today, we talked about the intersection between workforce excellence and public trust and confidence. So having a strong workforce that provides excellent customer service enhances the public's trust and confidence in the judiciary. Using data and analysis and trends and information to help improve your decision making and improve court processes is super impactful, one, on your staff as a whole, but two, to the public and the service that we're providing to them. And then it's important to understand the needs of the community you serve, but also the needs of your staff. What does your staff need to feel empowered? What do they need to feel included? What do they need to feel valued and appreciated so that you're not seeing those issues with retention and recruitment? And then having a plan of action. Put a strategic plan in place. Figure out what your mission, vision, and core values are. Make sure your staff understands what they are. How are you going to carry out your mission, vision, and core values? What are your well-defined goals? What does that look like? What does success look like to your court? And also anticipate future needs. So given the information you have and the plan that you're putting in place, what are we hoping to see? What are we expecting to see? What challenges are we expecting to encounter in the future? What additional skills do we think our staff is going to need, and how can we get them to where they need to be?
So I'm not going to add anything other than that, but to tell you, basically when you're looking for that public trust and competence, one approach is to look at it as it's an inside-out job. Go inside, fix things there, and then you should see the results on the outside. So thank you for your time.